Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, the tragic story of the Sikh abducted in California and found dead a few days later. As the community comes to terms with the tragedy, questions are being asked just who was behind it. In Canada, Mark Carney's recent declaration of his variable geometry agenda to push Canada forward is ripped apart by the Sikh community as both a betrayal of and an insult to Canada. In Punjab, as Sikh politics boils over in yet more controversy, is it going to be a new Sarbat Khalsa to try to settle Sikh politics once and for all in the Punjab? And Iowa becomes the 21st US state to include Sikhi in its school curriculum. All this and more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the video. So thank you for those and do stay tuned for that. Right, let's get underway. And this first story is it's been bubbling away actually in the mainstream press as much as anywhere else. This is the very tragic story of this gentleman who vanished. It appeared to be abducted. And as a result, there was this huge search and sadly his body was recently found. But let me give you a full sort of breakdown of what actually happened. And unsurprisingly, it's the Sikh community in California, particularly Central Valley, they're in mourning over this incident. It came really after the confirmation that this gentleman, Avtar Singh, he was a beloved Sevadar volunteer in the local community. He was abducted, weirdly, such a rare thing, but he was abducted from the Guru Nanak Parkash Gurdwara in Tracy, and then he was sadly found a few days ago deceased. He's 57 years old, he was a father, and he's been known for decades of humble service. And he was kidnapped in broad daylight on February the 17th. That then sparked a multi-agency search that sadly ended in tragedy when his body was discovered near Lake Berryessa in the area. Now, the incident actually began on Tuesday afternoon, that was February the 17th, at around 2:30 at the Gurdwara itself, the Gurdwara Guru Nanak Parkash, at the complex that's located in West Grant Line Road. Now, surveillance footage reviewed by the local county sheriff's office showed actually quite a chilling scene. 3 unidentified individuals dressed in dark clothing were seen forcing Singh into a white SUV. Now, deputies then responded to the Gurdwara later that evening around 8:52 to investigate the report of a missing person. And that was then when they reviewed the CCTV footage. They then worked out what had actually happened. He'd been put into this vehicle against his will that then led to an immediate kidnapping investigation. So nobody actually realised it had happened until the police were called when he was found to be missing. They reviewed the CCTV footage and found actually, unbeknownst to anybody, he'd been bundled into the back of a van. So after days of searching, the Napa County Sheriff's Office located his body, sadly, on Saturday afternoon, that's February the 21st, near Lake Berryessa, along State Highway 128. Now, the discovery prompted the closure of the highway between the Monticello Dam and the Rag Canyon Road as they investigated the scene. Now, formal identification was, of course, pending, and the Sheriff's Office then finally confirmed on Monday, February the 23rd, that was this Monday, the body was indeed that of Avtar Singh. And they did say the death didn't appear to have occurred at the location where the body was found. So clearly he was sadly murdered and then the body dumped. And the case has now been transferred back to the county authorities for a full homicide investigation. So those were the known facts of what actually happened. Now, Avtar Singh himself, he's known locally as Avtar Singh Bulat. He was a pillar of his local Gurdwara community, the Tracy Gurdwara community. He served as a volunteer in a langri, that's a cook, obviously for langar, for over 20 years. Now, before he arrived in California, he served at the headquarters of the Damdani Taxal at the Gurdwara Gurdashan Parkash in Punjab, in Chowk Mehta in Punjab. So then he came to the California about 20 years ago. Now, friends and people who knew him described him as a man of immense humility and quiet dedication. And, of course, the loss is felt most acutely by his family. He's survived by his wife and a 6-month-old triplet. So, again, you can see the tragedy of this story. Now, the brazen nature of this kidnapping from the Gurdwara has unsurprisingly sent shockwaves through the local community. And not just the local community, but the whole North American Sikh diaspora. And of course, it's leading to massive speculation about the motive. Now, the San Joaquin Sheriff's Office has stated that the incident appears to be isolated with no known ongoing threat to the community. Many, of course, in the community are saying, look, we need answers. What on earth was this about? Is there a broader threat to the community from this? And some community members have pointed to the wider context of recent threats, of course, against Sikh activists, particularly Khalistanis, right across North America and the whole diaspora. And the questions are, is this linked to Indian transnational oppression? And of course, countless examples of that. And authorities have not linked Singh's death to any political movement officially yet. Some reports have highlighted his history as a Panthic activist and, of course, his long-standing ties to the Damdani Taxil. Now, the Damdani Taxil, of course, I'm sure most of our audience will be aware, they are an influential Sikh educational and religious organisation. And they are, of course, linked to the Khalistan movement. The Sikh Federation UK and other international groups have previously raised alarms about transnational oppression, but investigators in Tracy have yet to release any evidence suggesting a political motive in this specific case. For all we know, it may have just been a simple criminal act. It might not have had political links, but we don't know yet. Still too early. Detectives are still obviously trying to identify the three suspects seen in that surveillance footage, and as of today, no arrests have been made, and actually the cause of death has not been publicly released. So in the wake of the tragedy, the Tracy community has rallied to support his family. A GoFundMe page has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to cover funeral expenses and, of course, to provide for the triplets' future. I mean, raising triplets, today is no mean feat, physically and, of course, financially. So, fortunately, the community, as always, as it always does, has rallied round on the GoFundMe page. And the local sheriff office has continued to urge anyone with information regarding a white SUV or the three individuals in dark clothing to please come forward to assist in the investigation. The local sheriff did actually come to that Gurdwara, and he addressed the congregation, the Panth, in this. I'm going to play you. He actually, in fact, I have to say, it was a very decent presentation by the local sheriff and one of the local politicians. They came down to the Gurdwara to speak. I've condensed this down into just a couple of minutes, but I just want to play this for you, just so you can get a flavour of what was said. Here we go.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here today and allowing me to be part of Temple this morning. It's always such an honor to come here and be with our community here at the Temple and represent the Sheriff's Office. I wish it wasn't on a day like this. I want to send my condolences to Mrs. Singh and the Singh family, and to his family, to Avatar's family here at the Temple. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's unspeakable what happened, and I'm here today to let you know that I and the power of my office are working 24 hours a day on this. Our investigation is going very, very well as far as identifying the people who did this and holding them accountable. This is an ongoing investigation, so we don't want to say a whole lot to do anything that might damage that and risk holding these people accountable to the fullest account of the law. But know that we are working day and night, as I said, to bring these people to justice. I did want to touch a little bit on the people who brought this evil to our community here. These are folks that know what they are doing is wrong, and yet they engage in this thinking that there will be no consequences for their actions. They think that they will just do their business and then go on, and that there'll be no consequences. They'll make quick money that will help them in their time of need. But now we see that not only will they pay for this, but our family here are the victims of this greed and this evil that has been brought here. So I ask, as I've asked before from you, to please, I need you to work with me. If you know things that are going on in your community, If you know people who are doing things that they should not be doing, whether it's people of your own community or people that are invited into this evil, we need you to reach out to us and tell us what's going on. Tell us who these people are that are engaged in these illegal activities.
And Ron Freitas.
Thank you, Sheriff. And to my friends in the Sikh community, I want to know that, like the Sheriff said, I hear your pain and I feel your pain. I'm here with the Sheriff and Supervisor Rickman today because we know you want justice. You want reassurance that your community is seen and heard. And I'm here today to let you know that we intend to find and convict those who committed this heinous act of violence.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
So that was that second speaker was the district attorney, a guy called Ron Freitas. So it's great to see actually how the sheriff and the DA have actually come down to the Gurdwara to extend their sympathies and actually try and build the bridges with the community, saying, look, we are doing everything we can to bring the perpetrators to justice. So you can see how seriously they're taking this whole incident. Okay, let's move on now, and I'm going to talk about Mark Carney. We talk a lot about Mark Carney because, of course, our Sikh community in Canada are deeply affected, directly affected. I'd say even more so than it seems than other diaspora nations, because the Sikh community has been so directly impacted by India's transnational oppression in Canada, of course, with the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And Justin Trudeau was actually really, as I keep saying, always at the vanguard of holding India to account for their transnational oppression in Canada. And since the changeover with Mark Carney, you could not have got a greater contrast in how the Sikh community, that nation's Sikh community, have been treated by its politicians. Now, here in the UK, our Sikh community have been treated like dirt by our politicians for centuries, decades. So nothing's changed here. The US, the community, well, you've just seen, they're treated with, I have to say, a lot more respect in North America. But for some reason in Canada, there's been this massive shift in attitude towards the Canadian Sikhs from the government. And it has obviously coincided with a change from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney. Now, I've talked a lot about Mark Carney, and regular viewers of the show know my feelings about Mark Carney. He is basically a World Economic Forum stooge. He's a globalist. He was parachuted into this position with no political background whatsoever, into suddenly he's running Canada, which in itself must raise suspicions of every conspiracy theorist on the planet, as indeed it has done. Basically, who is this guy? What is he doing? And why is he treating Sikh Canadians, who actually are responsible for electing the government to a large part, electing him into office? Why is he treating them with such disdain? And I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into, firstly, where his headspace is, what he's all about. Because he's been quite public about this, and people don't realise just what he's about. Apart from people like me, who's trying to tell the world, this is Mark Carney, this is who he really is, this is who he truly is. And unsurprisingly, there are those in the Sikh community who are standing up now saying, look, this just we cannot let this lie. This guy does not represent us, is not representing actually the values that we in Canada, and particularly the Sikh community, we Sikh Canadians represent. And they, of course, echo the values of the rest of the democratic world. They are the rule of law, basic freedoms, freedom of speech, rights to practice our religion, rights to go about our daily lives without fear or favour. And sadly, these have been abused in Canada because of the new policies of Mark Carney. So it all, those of you who follow the Davos situation, again, that classic World Economic Forum get-together of the world elite. And I hate to use that word elite because it gives them credit they don't actually deserve. But anyway, the world elite, for want of a better descriptor, meet every year in Davos. Mark Carney, of course, being one of those. And he actually, I have to say, did give a very powerful and very interesting speech at Davos. But he also followed it up with an article he wrote for The Economist in November at the end of last year. And this actually gives a real insight. And I'm just going to highlight some of the things that he said in this article, and then I'm going to go on to how the Sikh community have actually picked up on this. And a few representatives have picked up on this and reacted to it, saying, look, what on earth is going on? So he wrote in this article, he said, and I have to say I agree with some of what he says, and this is the reality of global geopolitics changing and morphing and evolving into this, essentially, sadly, this World Economic Forum globalist model that they're trying to create, the Great Reset, they call it. He said in this article there has been a breakdown of the post-Cold War order of multilateral institutions, rules and conventions. So they're basically saying post-Cold War, a lot of the old structure is falling apart. So what he said is to re-establish resilience, strength, a new web of ad hoc cooperation is beginning to emerge. We're entering an era of what he calls variable geometry, characterized by dynamic, overlapping, pragmatic coalitions built around shared interests and occasionally shared values rather than shared institutions. So interestingly, he's saying it's out with things like the United Nations, these structures that have pre-existed. It's now where we as nations will just cherry pick those that we want alliances with on whatever issue. It's actually, ironically, following the Indian model, where India has deliberately followed the same policy of not aligning on everything with one party, but cherry picking. Well, we'll align with Russia on this, but we'll align with the US on this. We'll align with China on this issue, but we'll align with Europe on this issue, whichever suits its interests on that one given issue, rather than actually being a bloc. We are a Western democratic nation and we align with the Five Eyes, for example. So this is what Mark Carney is saying, is that now we nations, even in the West now, particularly Canada, is going to follow this different model where we will not just be part of these old dinosaur institutions, we will just cherry pick nations on any particular issue that serve our best interest. But what is that best interest? Of course, we know what that is. It's the dollar over human rights. And he says a prominent example of this is the Coalition of the Willing, an ad hoc group of nations which has come together to support Ukraine. Prime example, yes, absolutely. Now, when I say what serves Canada's interests, it's not Canadian interests. In reality, it's the interests of the globalists. So what he's saying, let's break up these great blocks of things like the United Nations, and let's instead forge these coalitions that serve somebody else's interests. And in fact, it's actually not Canadian interests, it's his interests. And by his, read the World Economic Forum, the globalist interests. So he's saying we should break up the old United Nations and the old blocs, and instead let's all just get together that serves the globalist interest, because that's the agenda. Because the globalist agenda can't exist with the old blocs of the United Nations, etc. It can only exist when we break those apart and we form different alliances that can then help the World Economic Forum push its agenda. He says the impact of a bespoke, rapidly assembled alliance has been impressive. In just 6 months, the Coalition of the Willing has begun planning for boots-on-the-ground support in anticipation of a ceasefire, of course referring to Ukraine. Now, this Coalition of the Willing, this is who voted to support Ukraine? Who voted to send trillions of dollars to Ukraine? We didn't in the UK, you didn't in North America, you certainly didn't in Australia. And yet, literally trillions of dollars of our money has been channeled into Ukraine to fight this so-called bogeyman Putin. Now, whether or not you agree with the war to fight Putin in Ukraine, we didn't vote for that. Trillions of our money has disappeared in Ukraine. This great financial laundromat. Where's that money gone? Where have those trillions of dollars gone? It's into the hands of the globalist elite, the arms manufacturers, the war machine, the great industrial military complex, and God knows who else's pockets. Apparently Zelensky has bought a ski resort. This is a man from nowhere who suddenly became president, is now wealthy enough to buy a ski resort. So again, you can start to see the agenda underlying Carney's World Economic Forum agenda. It's, anyway. He continues to say, to address the risk of sudden disruptions to global trade in critical minerals, Canada is bringing together like-minded nations to form a critical minerals strategic alliance. The goal is to secure and diversify supply chains by investing in mining, stockpiling supplies and developing standards-based markets to guard against future shortages. In other words, This isn't about world peace or human rights or democracy. It's about bringing like-minded nations to form a critical minerals strategic alliance. Now, the evidence is Carney's visit to India, Modi coming to Canada to strike trade deals over minerals. There's been no secret about this. They've signed trade deals for mineral rights. Now, again, who's benefiting from that? Are you benefiting from these trade deals, these mineral trade deals? Of course you aren't. The benefiters are those who own these global conglomerates, the big corporations, the big mining corporations. Who owns that? Ultimately, the world elite, the very wealthy elite of the world. Again, it's all World Economic Forum. There's a clue in there, economic. It's all about money. So, anyway, so his article actually goes on at great length, and sadly I don't really have time to go in at great length about this. But what he does say, and I'll again just cherry pick a few sort of elements of it. He says, expect such purpose-built alliances to continue to proliferate. In other words, we are building this, and you can do nothing about it. Democracy doesn't feature in this. Even when their webs of connection are small, these groups can have outsized impacts by cutting through bureaucracy, moving fast, and reinforcing shared strategic interests. In other words, cutting bureaucracy. By that, read removing democracy. We don't want the inconvenient, uncomfortable issue of democracy. We don't want the people to have a say in this. We're just going to fast track this, whether you like it or not, so that we can tie up trade deals. You're not going to benefit. We benefit. Thank you very much. We don't want that irritating thing called democracy getting in the way. And it's speeding up. You can see how fast these things are suddenly happening now. The twilight of multilateralism will be followed by the rise of plurilateralism, he calls it. Instead of a single, reformed, rules-based trading system, a mosaic of partial agreements and creative docking arrangements between blocs could develop. This is the most sinister phrase. Basically, what he is saying, we're leaving behind the old rules-based trading system, replacing it with a mosaic of partial agreements and, his word, creative arrangements. In other words, we're going to hide what we're doing. We're going to move away from the old rules-based thing where you could check off what we were doing and hold us to account against a set of rules. No, we're going to have a mosaic of partial agreements, this sort of complex, vague agreements behind which we can hide what we're doing. You can't hold us to account. That's what this is about. It's deeply sinister, and it's in plain sight. And as he finalises his article, he says, through the growth of variable geometry, and although it risks fragmentation, breaking up, and duplication and potential inequities, that's inequalities. So he's saying, he admits that this variable geometry risks fragmentation, risks breaking up of the old order, and potential inequities for those left outside these clubs. Such concerns should be outweighed by the benefits of speed, adaptability, and impact. So what he's saying is, although we admit it's going to lead to inequalities if you're outside these clubs, so if you're not in our club, you're going to lose. The benefit is speed, adaptability, and impact. The benefit is profitability. Not for you, not for me, for them. So again, it's all in plain sight. It's so sinister. As he says, nostalgia isn't a strategy. We should not pine to go back to the world that was. We should focus on building something better. Better for who, Mr. Carney? Better for who? So that was, again, in plain sight. This is what they do, the globalists. It's all out there in plain sight, and people don't realise it. It's only when people like myself saying, look, wake up to what these people are doing to our world. They are raping us, financially raping us. They're imprisoning us in their surveillance society. This is Mark Carney. He is just but one of a whole portfolio of people who represent these globalists. Anyway, so the National Observer in Canada took a look at this just a few days ago. Fortunately, waking up to what's going on, I'm going to quickly go through this so you can sort of see. This is the reaction from a guy called Supriya Dwivedi, who wrote this opinion piece in the National Observer in Canada. And what he said, with news out of the US last week that an Indian national pleaded guilty to the Gupta and Singh Panoon plot, the direction of an employee of the Indian government, Carney's rapprochement with Modi looks even more foolish than it already did. Although Gupta's primary target was an American activist, his guilty plea, of course, then was linked to Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Gupta then, we know, sent text boasting about Nijjar's murder, stating that Nijjar was also the target. We have so many targets, etc., etc. In other words, there is this clear, unambiguous link between Nijjar's murder in Canada and Gupta and Singh Panoon, which in turn was linked to the Indian government. So this guilty plea ends any question of India's involvement in extrajudicial and extraterritorial reprisals against Khalistanis. It's now a legally established fact and a matter of official judicial record that India was involved in a plot to murder a Sikh dissident. At the very least, a single Sikh dissident. We know it's wider than that. The Gupta plea also basically vindicates what we've heard from Canadian officials, including the RCMP and, of course, CSIS, who've publicly stated that the agents of the Indian government are working with organised crime networks in Canada to essentially target Canadian Sikhs. In a normal world, this would make the Carney government think twice about normalising relations with India. But we're not in a normal world. In the Prime Minister's own words, we have entered, quote, variable geometry, wherein realpolitik and pragmatic diplomacy must prevail. I think that's a very euphemistic way of putting it. I would be a bit ruder than that. Modi does not want diplomacy with Canada. Modi wants Canada to stand down and to have India skirt any real accountability from Canadian authorities. And under Carney, the Canadian government seems more than willing to allow just that. And then in this article, he refers to, again, this variable geometry. He highlights, he refers specifically to that Economist article by Mark Carney and his use of the phrase variable geometry. And then he concludes, it starts to make a lot of sense when those shared interests do not include the safety of your own citizens. So, of course, picking out Mark Carney's own words about shared interests, these nations that were tying up these minerals trade deals, we do it with nations that share our interests. Again, this is something that we highlight regularly here on Perspectives. Do we share interests or do we share values? We share interests with India, but notice there's no shared values. Mark Carney never actually refers to shared values. We have shared interests in terms of money. I say we, they. The globalists share interests with the globalist equivalents in India of making money, profitability, but they don't share values. There's no shared values between Canada and India, despite the fact that India declares itself democracy. It's not. We say daily. We give evidence daily of how India is not really a democracy. So there is no shared values. That's the difference. Apparently, the Carney government's realpolitik and pragmatism means actively ignoring the now legally established fact that India targets dissidents abroad for extrajudicial murder. A mere 24 hours after the news of the Gupta plea was made public, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand in Canada was tweeting pictures of herself alongside her Indian counterpart. All smiles with only Indian flags as the backdrop. So again, another representative of the Canadian government, Anita Anand, shaking hands with her Indian counterpart in front of an Indian flag, even as the news dropped that India was implicated in the Nikhil Gupta case. What message is that sending out? The message is very clear, that trade with India is more important than Sikhs' safety, than Canadian citizens' safety. Sikh Canadian lives simply do not matter as much as those of other Canadians. So in other words, it's not just general Canadian citizens' lives that are really irrelevant. It's actually differentiating the Sikh community, saying you are even less relevant as citizens and your safety to the Canadian government. The Carney government continues to maintain that law enforcement and national security officials are working together behind the scenes. But as recently as just a few months ago, Dinesh Patnaik, he's the Indian High Commissioner in Canada, and I did show this interview, he actually said, he denied it all. We don't do this in India. It's not what we do. We don't murder people overseas. And then, to add salt to the wound, he actually said, apart from the fact that these accusations are preposterous and absurd, he actually said, it's up to the RCMP to make things right. To make it right. He's implying that it's the RCMP is the people at fault here. It's not India, it's the RCMP that are the problem. I mean, the brazen, outrageous way he's turned it around. But I showed that interview at the time of Dinesh Patnaik, saying it's not India, it's you guys in Canada, it's your own law enforcement that's the problem. So, amongst all this context, and particularly Patnaik's blaming the RCMP for, essentially, Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder, this has been met with, as it says in this article, cowardly silence from Anand and Carney. Today, even India's enemies know this is Modi, this is the new India. This new India comes into your home to kill you. Those are the words of Narendra Modi leading up to last year's elections. Just before he was re-elected as Prime Minister of India, he actually admitted that this is the new India. This new India comes into your home to kill you, as evidenced by the attempt on Gurpratap Singh Pannu, as evidenced by Hardeep Singh Nijjar, as evidenced by Avtar Singh Kandar, etc., etc. So the article finishes off by saying Modi doesn't want diplomacy with Canada. Modi wants Canada to stand down and to have India skirt any real accountability from the Canadian government and Canadian authorities. Under Mark Carney, the Canadian government seems more willing to do just that. After all, there are rupees and dollars to be made from increased trade, but that doesn't sound quite as good for an essay in The Economist as stating we're in a moment of variable geometry, does it? So that's a powerful piece, but yeah, absolutely. It really just does sum up this issue. And I've said it on an almost daily basis. This is all about dollars over human rights. The Canadian Sikh community doesn't matter. In fact, it's not just doesn't matter. We really don't care about the Canadian Sikh community. We'll let India murder our citizens, our Sikh citizens. Doesn't matter, because we're getting rich off it. And they dress it up saying, oh, it's trade deals, we all benefit. No, we all don't. There's only a very small number of people who benefit from these globalist trade deals. It's the billionaires, it is those corporations that are making the real money, the shareholders of the corporations that are the beneficiaries of these sorts of trade deals. Breaking up the old rules-based world order, that's what they're doing. They're breaking up the old rules-based world order and replacing it with this vague, complex, unaccountable, undemocratic situation where they tie up deals between each other. The globalists around the world are tying up deals between each other to enrich themselves, not us. That's the reality of what's going on. Wake up, people. This is what it's all about. The Sikh community are losing out. Sadly, it's not just the Sikh community, it's all of us. All of us ordinary folk are losing out. And Mark Carney is one of the most obvious representatives of what's going on here, of the World Economic Forum. This is, I have to say, some of the world's greatest evil of the 21st century are these people. They're the ones controlling, and probably arguably have been for centuries, but ultimately these people are controlling our society for their benefit, not for our benefit. We are losing democracy globally. Unfortunately, the people who are governing our countries, who are controlling our economies, and again, you can argue this has been going on since time began, but ultimately, they're not doing it for our benefit. Democracy, actually, ironically, is a bit of an illusion, even in the West. But ultimately, at least there is some level of accountability, as indeed the Epstein files have proved. But ultimately, these people are getting away with it, and they're getting away with it in plain sight. Variable geometry. There you go. What an evil phrase. I mean, what does that hide? Variable geometry. So, sadly, although this is pertinent specifically to the Canadian diaspora, this affects us all, right across the Western world, and I obviously include the Southern Hemisphere in that. But we living in democratic nations, and those of you, all the countries that you're probably living in, you will be affected by this variable geometry. and it's there in plain sight. This is what it's all about. It's removing accountability, and it's tying up deals that are not rules-based anymore. It's tying up deals that are now unaccountable and hidden behind this complex web. Don't say I didn't warn you. Right, let's go to talk about politics and how politics has been poisoned by these sorts of people. Sikh Siyasat News reported an interesting development, actually. I'm going to play a video just in the background. Let me show you this whilst I speak. And make sure there's no sound on that. There we go. This is actually a bit of a major development in the Sikh religious hierarchy. I do talk about Punjabi politics quite a lot because, of course, we do know it's been infiltrated by the RSS and the Hindutva forces. And it does have a direct impact on the global diaspora because, of course, the hub, the centre of Sikhi is obviously based in the Punjab. The SGPC, all the Akhil Takht is another prime example. These organisations that are being infiltrated by these forces from the RSS, the Brahmanical elite, these people are sadly dissolving the core of Sikhi, or doing their best to dissolve it. So there is this ongoing battle to regain control of Sikh politics and the hub of Sikhi in the Punjab. So Jani Ragbir Singh, he's a prominent figure who served as the head granthi of Sri Darbar Sahib and also as the SGPC appointed Jatadar of the Akhil Takht Sahib. Of course, the Akhil Takht is the highest seat of Sikhi. He's publicly levelled several serious allegations recently of corruption and mismanagement against the SGPC. Now, he wrote a press note, Jani Ragbir Singh. He called actually for a new Sarbat Khalsa. This, of course, is a historic assembly of the entire Sikh community. And of course, we recently had the commemoration of the 1986 famous Sarbat Khalsa, in which that was the formal launch of the Khalistan movement. But Jani Ragbir Singh is calling for a new Sarbat Khalsa to address what he describes as deep-seated systemic failures within the administration of Sikh institutions. So his core allegations that he made, they centre on several key issues that have long been points of contention within the Panth. Firstly, that of financial corruption. He alleges that there is widespread financial malpractice and corruption within the SGPC's economic dealings. Well, if you're involved with the RSS, of course there probably is going to be. He's also made allegations that has been the desecration of the Guru Granth Sahib. The Jatadar raised concerns regarding the management and respect shown towards the Sarups, that's the volumes of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, touching upon past and ongoing issues of sacrilege. So he's saying basically there is there is disrespect going on towards the Sarups, and there has been a whole scandal recently about damage to Sarups. And of course, he's highlighting the political interference, where he's saying that there is a significant portion, or a significant portion of his critique was dedicated and aimed, unsurprisingly, at the influence of the Badal family. We have talked about the Badal family at great length on this programme. And he accused the Badal family and, of course, its proxies, its faction, of using the SGPC as a political tool to serve their own interests and, of course, the interests of the RSS, rather than the spiritual and social goals of the Khalsa Panth. And he also accuses that there has been an undermining of the Akhil Takht. He stated that the Jatadars are often kept under pressure, sometimes being summoned to private residences rather than being allowed to act independently from the Takht. So basically he's saying that the Jatadars of the highest seat, the Akhil Takht, are being basically pressurised and summoned to private homes away from public sight or again, we talk about rules-based order, again, away from any accountability, that they're basically being pressured into making statements, policies, whatever, under pressure, of course, from the RSS representatives. So this discussion that happened just yesterday, in fact, and it was a recent analysis by Sikh Siyasat, and it featured by Mandir Singh. It provides a lot of critical context. It isn't Punjabi, unfortunately, so I've had to sort of try and translate it as much as I can and glean bits of it. But basically, this discussion did highlight some critical context to these allegations and actually the feasibility of calling a new, fresh Sarbat Khalsa in the modern era. And of course, these Sarbat Khalsas are very rare. They only happen, well, very rarely in history, and that one in 1986 was a particular example of that. So this discussion highlights the fact that for nearly 30 years, basically since the rise of the Badal family in the late 1990s, the disease of corruption and political subservience has deepened. And Mandir Singh notes that while Jenny Ragbir Singh's points are valid, the Panth itself has struggled to move beyond just criticising individuals. The real challenge is finding a structural solution, a new system or process to replace the failing one. In other words, it's all very well people singling out individuals who are guilty of this, like single voices like me pointing the finger at the Badal family. It's not working. It's not going to change anything. We need what he calls a structural solution. We need something more solid. We need our own organisations, in other words, to fight back against this infiltration. Mandir points out a paradox also. While Jani Ragbir Singh was in the position of Jatadar, he had the authority to initiate these changes or call for a collective deliberation, but largely acted within the existing secret and non-transparent processes. And his recent call for a Sarbat Khalsa is seen as a sign of the extreme insecurity and fear within the current leadership as the community's trust continues to erode. And the video also just digs into what a true Sarbat Khalsa would look like today. It said it would be representative. It wouldn't just be a crowd. A Sarbat Khalsa isn't just a general gathering of the public. It is an assembly of representatives from various Sikh organisations, Jatas as they're called. Historically, participants had to be Amritdhari Sikhs. In other words, they had to be initiated into the Khalsa, and regular in their daily prayers, Nitnem, and active in service to the Panth or the righteous war, the Dharam Yudh. So historically, participants had to qualify as Amritdhari Sikhs. The global Panth, of course, there are nearly 10 million Sikhs, at least, living outside of the Punjab. So any modern Sarbat Khalsa must, of course, find a way to include the global diaspora to be truly representative. Because, of course, particularly Khalistanis, there are countless Khalistanis amongst the diaspora. They, of course, need to be representative in this Sarbat Khalsa. Now, there is a significant debate regarding whether a Sarbat Khalsa can be called independent of the SGBC-controlled Akal Takht. Mandir Singh argues that since the current SGBC is subservient to a political party, which in turn is subservient to the Delhi Takht, of course, the Indian central government, and by that read the RSS, a truly independent Sarbat Khalsa would likely need to happen outside of the current SGPC management. In other words, the SGPC is tainted. It doesn't represent us. It's infiltrated. It's basically RSS controlled. We need to, if there's going to be a new Sarbat Khalsa, it's got to be outside that framework of the existing SGPC. And the consensus among many activists is that the Sikh community needs to practice collective decision-making at local levels first, to then rebuild the tradition of the Gurmata, that's the divine resolution, before attempting a massive global assembly. So they're saying, look, we need to build this from the grassroots upwards. And one wonders actually, and they don't mention this in this interview, but one wonders if there is collusion and cooperation, coordination with, for example, the Shiromani Akali Dal Waris Punjab Day organisation, that of Amritpal Singh. There needs to be a political type to this as well to give it gravitas and weight, and of course a political voice. I don't know, but I suspect there may be conversations going on behind the scenes with SAD, Waris Punjab Day, and those representatives may be pushing for a new Sarbat Khalsa. But ultimately, this is all about trying to build up new institutions to try and fight back against the infiltration of the Akal Takht, of the SGPC, because that's the only way that Sikh Punjabi Sikhs are going to get their voice back, get their power back, and push back against the RSS, who obviously have now taken control of the Punjab. So, again, part of this multilateral fight back, and again, ultimately, this will lead to the establishment of Khalistan. Right, let's move on to my final story. Delighted to say, Iowa has now become the 21st state. Oh, sorry, let me. Oh, where are you? Oh, there you are. It's all gone wrong. Oh, got too many buttons to press. There you go. Iowa has become the 21st state to include Sikhi in its curriculum, in its school curriculum, the social studies standards. Delighted to report this. There you go. In autumn 2025, the Sikh Coalition education team reached out to the Board of Education, as they have done right across the US and all other states, to leverage their social studies standards review as an opportunity to add Sikhi. And this news has been shared right across social media now, which is great news. The team met with the state social studies consultants to share the curriculum resources that the coalition itself can offer. And the final version of the new standards do include Sikhi in 7th grade modern world history. And the Sikh Coalition will, of course, continue this work. And they will work closely with the Iowa Board of Education during the upcoming implementation process for the new standards. And it's given that the Sikh Coalition's efforts to ensure similar Sikh inclusion in state social studies standards across the country, more than 26 million students across the US, from coast to coast, have now the possibility of a more inclusive and holistic education. And I'm just going to show you a map. Here you go. Spreading across the United States, delighted to report. It's now, 21 states that are now including Sikhi in their curriculum at 7th grade level. So we're getting there, nearly halfway there, but ultimately this is, of course, a fight back against Hindutva, RSS, who are doing the same job from the opposite side. Hindutva and RSS are pushing the Hindu extremist narrative into school curricula. They are trying to push the Indian narrative through US education to try and indoctrinate young Americans, whether Sikhs or whatever, literally all Americans, young Americans, the Hindutva narrative, which of course is not the truth. It's a completely fabricated history. It tries to erase Sikh culture. So the Sikh Coalition is working very, very hard, and I have to say very successfully, to push back against this and educate the young. This is the truth. This is who Sikhs are. This is how they have suffered under the hands of the Brahmins in India. At events like 1984, the Sikh genocide, etc., they will all be included in the curriculum as part of the Sikhi educational standards, so that young Americans, as they grow up, they know the truth about how this minority has been persecuted so terribly in India. And explains also why so many Sikhs are in the diaspora, because they have fled this level of persecution. So well done to Sikh Coalition. The work continues. Still many more states to complete, but well done to their efforts. Right, on that positive note, let's move on to our comments column. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful audience. God bless you for such loyalty and such contributions that you make on such a regular basis, and particularly to our regulars, but also to those of you who do drop in periodically. Bobby Singh, again one of our regulars. Hi, Bobby. PM Modi is directly involved in many killings. You refer to, I didn't know this, I do know the butcher of Gujarat, Narendra Modi, who was actually banned from visiting the United States because of his involvement in the massacre of 2,000 Muslims in Gujarat in, I think it was about 2000. I didn't realise he was also implicated in the killing of actually another BJP politician in Gujarat, a guy called Pandya, and Judge Lohia a day before he was going to rule against Amit Shah. I mean, the plot thickens, doesn't it? What is it about Narendra Modi? I guess you can't rise to those lofty heights of becoming Indian Prime Minister, a nation that is so deeply corrupt and that is such a false image of a democracy. You can't rise to those sorts of heights unless you are a ruthless, forgive my language, bastard. And clearly, Narendra Modi is a ruthless bee. And there you go. Thank you, Bobby, for highlighting that. I didn't actually have time to go into deep research and tell our audience who might not be aware of this, but I did quickly flick through this story. And yeah, Modi is implicated in a string of murders. Again, is anybody surprised? The dirty politics of India. Cam K says, or Cam K said, thank you, gentlemen. Government of India has been proven to be responsible for transnational oppression. It has. State terrorism, indeed. India is arguably, officially, a terrorist state. Guilty must be held accountable. Well, this is the problem. This is where it all falls apart, Cam KZ. We're trying to, but who are we? it's our own governments that need to hold India to account. But we can't. Our own governments don't seem to be accountable to our communities. They just go about their own thing. Look at Mark Carney. We just talked about Mark Carney. At least Justin Trudeau had the credit to try and hold India to account, but he got kicked out, and then comes a parachuted Mark Carney. We've got Starmer implicated in grooming gang scandals, etc. Trump, well, I don't know. Where do I begin with Donald Trump? Bless him. Anyway, 1S1 Oh yes, this was an interesting discussion about the universe and the 14. We talked about the 14 worlds. Thank you to one of our commenters. Who was it? In fact, was it 1S1 and 2? I forget. Anyway, somebody made a comment yesterday about the 14 worlds. It was a fascinating comment, and it then led on to me explaining the history, and it goes all the way back to the first Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who actually did make a proclamation. In Sukhmani Sahib, Guruji tells us that the universe has expanded over and over, thus describing the expansion and contraction of the universe over billions of years. Guru Sahib reveals, Kai Bar Pasario Pasar. Many times the universe has been created. This is fascinating. So, centuries before our cosmologists came up with the Big Bang theory that the universe exploded, has expanded, has continued to expand, and also the theories that it then contracts, Big Bangs again. This secret, the universe just goes on forever, contracting and expanding. The gurus in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji actually told us centuries ago, this is what's happening. Wow. I might have to say my mind is quite blown. These guys, and I often say how the Sikh Empire was centuries ahead of time. They were years ahead of us in the West. Well, it looks like the gurus themselves were centuries ahead, even in science. And Pam Mathwell says, Guru Nanak Dev Ji says in Japji Sahib that God created infinite galaxies. Scientists actually have now realised this. Thank you, Angus. I wish we could all stand up for justice. Well, we all can. We all do. Don't diss yourself. You do. We all do. We are all single voices, but together we are united against injustice. This is what Sikhi is. It is a fight. It is a unification of all of us as a family, as a group, as a religious entity, whatever you want to call it. But Sikhi unites people to fight against injustice. That is what we're all doing. And we're doing, I have to say, a very good job of it. Keep going. Keep up this momentum. Punjab, good afternoon, Angus. Yes, you did like my stupid title, as the critic said the other day. What a stupid title. Punjab equals cannon fodder. I had to explain to those who might not be familiar with the phrase cannon fodder are those troops in the old days you put it on the front of your army as you advance upon the enemy. They were the cannon fodder because they were literally feed for the enemy's cannon, so they would be the first to die. And, of course, the Punjabis, since India Delhi put nuclear weapons on Punjabi soil, that now means Punjab has become the first target in any conflict. Hence, Punjab equals cannon fodder. But you like that, Punjab, as indeed I did. Very provocative it was, wasn't it? Designed to be provocative. You could almost call it clickbait. I hate that phrase, and I hate to be accused of clickbait, but it was a little bit clickbaity. It was designed to be a little bit deliberately provocative. Troublemaker, indeed. I do like to stir the pot, as indeed we all have an obligation to do so. You should have used Forlorn Hope. I wonder if you're... you must be a Napoleonic Wars fan. The Forlorn Hope... we don't suddenly have time to go into this, and I'm always fascinated by military history. Again, which is another reason why I align so closely with Sikhi, is because of the rich, wonderful military heritage of the Sikh people. And the Forlorn Hope, again, was the people who were the first soldiers to breach. Whenever a fortress was attacked by an army, particularly the British army, whenever the fortress was attacked, as soon as the walls were breached, then the first soldiers that went through were called the Forlorn Hope. They were called the Forlorn Hope because they were most likely to die. They are the first through that breach where they're just going to get shot to pieces by the cannon. And they were known as the Forlorn Hope. Red shirts, food for powder, etc., etc. So, anybody who's interested in Napoleonic Wars, read the Sharp series by Bernard Cornwell. Just fabulous. Anyway, That's the side issue. Thank you, Punjab, for the appreciation of cannon fodder. Amakira, today's Critics' Corner was hilarious. It was, wasn't it? I loved it. You can see the self-entitlement of the Punjab police. This, of course, was this Punjab, well, we assume, he claims he was a Punjabi policeman. The way he gave himself the longest title to make himself sound important indeed. And I don't want to hold him up if he indeed is a Punjabi policeman. I have a great respect for the police force, whether it's in the Punjab or here. And I let me caveat that when I say the Punjab police force, because of course they're not all bad. There are probably, of course, many are Sikhs. They're not all bad. They are trying to do a very difficult job. But the Punjabi police are sadly implicated in some of the worst atrocities, humanitarian atrocities in history, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s. And sadly, this guy came on, and I think his comment was, "Who the F are you?" And I had to reply accordingly. And well, as I say, I mean, if he wants to big himself up, I mean, I've invited him to comment back, and he hasn't, sadly. He obviously must have just been a flyby fake Sikh, because, again, I find it very difficult to understand how a Sikh can actually become a Punjabi policeman and therefore be complicit in the state's oppression of Sikhs in the Punjab. Not just Sikhs, just Punjabis generally speaking. Again, of course, there is an alignment with law and order. I get that. But sadly, the Punjabi police have been implicated in some terrible crimes. So, and of course, torture cells. Need I say more? How can a Sikh, a genuine Sikh, be associated with torture cells? It just doesn't sit with the teachings of the gurus. Hatareki. Hi, Angus. How are you? I'm actually very well, thank you. And all the better for your comments. Thank you for that. Please spread some light on this matter as well. This guy's spreading all the lies regarding the Khalistan movement. Yes, thank you for this. This is fascinating. I am going to do a story on this tomorrow. This link, for those of you, please do go watch it. It's in Punjabi. I again had to use the amazing might of AI to try and translate it. It's a fascinating video by a young Sikh who was a Khalistani, has left the Khalistan movement, and is now bad-mouthing the Khalistan movement. And I have to say, deeply suspicious. Of course, I respect his right to say what he was saying. He can criticise the Khalistan movement. Anybody can criticise the movement. But it does come in a context of Hindutva RSS propaganda. Of course, the RSS love to encourage people like this. If you have... Of course, there's always going to be fallouts in any political movement. It's normal. Every political movement in history has always had fallouts, fragmentation, etc. So, of course, there are going to be some disaffected in the Khalistan movement. Absolutely. We don't hide it. There are going to be those who don't agree with it, who start it and then say, no, it's not for me. But, of course, they're going to be whipped up and encouraged by the Hindutva forces to turn against the Khalistan movement, to launch YouTube channels to try and bring down the Khalistan movement, because the RSS are desperate now. They realise that they're losing this war. They realise Khalistan is coming. They realise that they have to become increasingly desperate in their tactics to stop the Khalistan movement. And so when anybody who leaves the Khalistan movement goes public, they're on them immediately saying, yeah, this is great. We will support you. We will give you resources. We will encourage you and whip you up to go public about how bad and evil and even how terrorist the Khalistan movement is. So that's unsurprising. Stay safe. You waded in here as well. And you said you appeared on the Sangha ex-Khalistani Detractor channel. I haven't seen that channel, actually. I must have a look at that. I guess it'll be in Punjabi, so I'm at a massive disadvantage here. And you say you've even had a verbal run-in with the Sangha guy. So, yeah, there is. We have to be fully aware of this. Thanks, Hatareki, for pointing this out. We have to be careful. There are people out there who are doing their damnedest to bring down the Khalistan movement, and they're using dirty tactics. So, obviously, be aware of that. I will cover this story tomorrow, so thank you for that. Stay safe. Yeah, you came back with this. This is an interesting comment, very specific to the UK, but it is actually relevant to all Sikhs globally. The modus operandi, the methods of the RSS and Hindutva is to spread hate and division. This has never more so manifested itself than in the UK a few years ago, 2022. One of our cities, Leicester, in the Midlands. Leicester has a very large ethnic minority demographic. We have a lot of Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs. All demographics are represented to a very large degree in Leicester. And 4 years ago nearly now, we had riots between I have to say, it was terrifying to watch. There were this huge mob, crowds of Muslims came up against crowds of Hindus, and all sorts of clashes, violence broke out between these two communities that actually, ironically, had lived quite peacefully and quite happily together for many years. And yet, as a result, sadly, of the Hindutva methodology, they've deliberately gone out there to whip up anti-Muslim hate. It's right-wing extremism. And it's also fed, as Stay Safe points out in your comments, Stay Safe, it's fed into the far right in the UK. And of course, it's the same right across the diaspora, North America, down under, Europe. The far right is being whipped up. This is all fodder. This is feed to the far right, because the RSS, who themselves are far right extremists, they are whipping up hatred in the West to turn communities against each other. So even normal, decent Hindus are turning against normal, decent Muslims, who they all used to live quite happily together, to turn them against each other, to start attacking each other physically, literally physical violence in the streets. And all this is doing is feeding this machine of hatred that is feeding against right-wing, white right-wingers now saying, look, these bloody immigrants are fighting in our streets, kick them out. So you can see what's going on here. They're turning all of us against each other. And this is what we need to fight back against. And this is a microcosm, a small example of everything that's happening across the diaspora. We're seeing rising hate crime. We're seeing the rise of right-wing extremism, because these sorts of clashes between the minority groups in our nations is now providing food for right-wing extremists. It's giving them evidence. It's giving them power. And you can see that happening particularly in the USA under ICE and all these sorts of things, etc., etc. So it is a warning. There's a warning to all of us. Final set, thank you. And there was this. I put these in deliberately. These were lovely. Guljinder Purawal, Sukhwant Singh, Mai Palwinder Singh, Satinder Hassan. Thank you, Angus. Thanks. God bless you. Thanks. Great journalism in action. Thanks. No, this is a big thank you to you. I always turn this back on you. Believe me, I appreciate these thank yous. As I often say, it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. It gets me up in the morning when you guys are so grateful. But I turn it straight back on you. I only do this because of you guys. I'm only sitting in the seat because you guys are there. Because I can't do the show without you. I need you as my, firstly, obviously, logically, I need an audience. But secondly, it's because we together are uniting. We are a united voice that is pushing the Khalistan movement, that is pushing Sikh issues, that is getting Sikh issues on the agenda of the politicians. Because, as we often say, individually we have no power, but together, our united power, you guys with me, we have the power to change things. Change is happening. Khalistan is coming. We see it on a daily basis. I bring you evidence of it on a daily basis. It's coming. And this is because we, all of us, are working together to make it happen in our own individual little ways. We're all contributing in our own little ways. Each one of you out there, in your jobs, your daily lives, in your communities, in your gurdwaras, all uniting together, pushing this one single agenda. Freedom is coming. Justice is coming. Khalistan is coming. It's happening. Because of us, because of what we're doing here. So thank you. My thanks goes straight back to you guys. And Sukhwinder Dhillon has the final say on this, of course. Khalistan's in the bad. That is what it is all about. Indeed. So that's it for another day. Thanks so much to all of you. Thank you for all your contributions. Do keep them coming. Love the comments where you link to things that I need to know about. Always fascinating to go down those rabbit holes. Keep that up. Message me directly. I do read, obviously, all your emails. Thank you to those of you who have emailed. Much appreciated. message@satlugetv.com. But that's it for another day. We're over time, as always. Why not? I could talk all day about this, as I'm sure you guys wouldn't want to listen to me all day. But anyway, I'll bring things to a close today. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, see you tomorrow.